Hey guys, how is everybody doing? Today is a very special day for me. So today, August 18th, 2023, marks the 50th anniversary of the events of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, if you've never seen the movie, in the opening of the film, it shows that the movie takes place on August 18th of 1973. Yeah, technically the movie had its release in 1974 in October, but in the movie's events, it takes place on in 1973 73 of August 18th, which today marks the 50th anniversary. As I'm recording this, today is the 50th anniversary of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and today is a very special day for me personally and possibly for my channel. No, don't ask about the hair. That is for a different video. And before I begin giving you my long list of positives, I'm just going to say this now. For those of you who don't know, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my favorite horror movie of all time. This is my favorite horror movie. Out of all the dozens of horror movies out there, all the horror movies I've praised, all the horror movies that I've loved to death and given my reasons why I love it, from pure memory, nostalgic, why I love it so much. But for the past 5 to 6 years, I have chosen that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, in fact, my favorite horror movie. And there are very rare movies where the second I finish them, I go right back and just rewatch them again. But we shall get into that with this review. With that all out of the way, with all of the stuff I'm about to bring up later out of the way, here are my thoughts on the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. My positives, my very long list of positives, is I really love the sound design of this movie. I don't really talk about sound design on my reviews. I never really bring it up. It's just I don't know why. But to me, the sound design of this movie is great. Like the way that they make the music go, where like apparently they use like actual bones to make some of the music, like that whole score. Like some of that shit, like every time I rewatch that, every time I hear that classic score of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I get chills down my spine. It is that fucking good. I love the sound design of this movie, like that famous like camera flash like sound, like shit like that. It's like how, this movie was made 50 years ago. Like, it's amazing what they could have pulled off with a very small budget for a limited sound design when movies today waste it and it makes it sound like dog shit. Every time somebody wastes a sound design in a movie, I just immediately think of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and I go, dude, they were able to do that like 50 years ago and you can't do it now. It makes me angry. The sound design in this movie, every time I hear it, it just makes chills go up my spine. I love that. And it's very rare where I'll ever talk about sound design in my reviews. Like, again, it's very rare for me personally. I just never talk about it. I don't really know why, but I probably should. But I just love the sound design of this movie. It's great. It's fantastic. It's just, let's just put it this way. It makes my dick hard. Now, this is another thing I never really talk about on my channel when it comes to movie reviews, and that is the cinematography by Danielle Pearl. Now, if you don't know who Pearl is, he is the cinematographer of this movie and the remake of this movie. Very, very strange. I love the cinematography of this movie. I don't know what it is, but every time I watch this movie, the cinematography, the way it like shoots certain things, it makes the shot of the movie making it its own character. I don't know what it is. Every time I rewatch this movie, and every time there's a certain shot in this movie, like the scene where they're picking up the hiker, and like that whole wide shot where you just see the van pull over on the side of the road, and you can just kind of see like a little glimpse of the hitchhiker going over to the van. Scenes like that, it just makes that whole scene kind of make it its own character. I don't know why. Like that whole scene where Pam is walking up to the house with kind of like a down at her butt in a way. Like that whole scene, it just makes Pam like her own character. That whole shot of her walking up to the house, her own character. And it's a very steady cam too. Like there's no like shaky cams in this movie. Like it baffles me that there's so many shaky cams in movies today when they could have pulled it off 50 years ago today. I'm gonna keep saying that, aren't I? I love the cinematography of this movie, and I think almost everybody who hates this movie, or even if you love or hate this movie, I feel that you cannot doubt that the cinematography in this movie is some of the best, and arguably probably the best cinematography like in any horror movie. Hell, in any movie general. Yeah, sure, I might top of my mind, I can't really think of any movies right now, but the cinematography in this movie, it's perfect. And like I never really talk about that stuff, but when it comes to a movie like this, I feel I have to talk about it. Like, again, I never talk about it, but I never know why. But the cinematography in this movie is just fantastic. Again, another thing I never talk about, and that's the set pieces of this movie. You want to talk about gritty realism in a movie? This is the definition of that. What I love about learning about the set pieces of this movie, the guy who did the set pieces, who you reused his set pieces in this movie over to Wes Craven's original The Hills Have Eyes, which is a okay movie. But what I love about learning about the behind the scenes, now, I'm just going to say this now. What I'm about to say is pretty fucked up, where apparently in some kind of country, I believe it was like India or something like that. I don't know. I could be getting that wrong. I remember it was something like that. It might have been India or Indiana or something like that. But apparently, if you died and they would leave out your body for it to turn into skeleton, they'd package it and then like ship it off to Hollywood apparently. Now, it might sound fake. It could be all I know from what I read. Like again, this could be fake, but at the same time, but what I read, it seemed realistic, and the man who did the set pieces of this movie, he used those actual bones of people, and he put them out to make it look like it was actual bones. Like I never knew that for the longest time. Like, but every time I rewatch this movie, it's just like, man, those bones look so real. Like, they're fake. I know that, but like every time I rewatch this movie, it's like, God, they seem so real. But upon this rewatch, I actually had to look it up. Those are real bones. Those are real human bones. Like those bones that you see throughout this entire movie, those are not fake. Those are real bones of a human body. It's very fucked up, but again, they should have, like when you think about it, they should have never really did that. That feels very unnecessary. But it's badass. Like it's like holy shit, like what the fuck? And like just the whole like like the whole room of like Leatherface's room where he like cuts up people, hooks people up, like that whole room just looks like a whole like a kitchen, which it's kind of meant out to be like Kirk on the table, him cutting him up and everything, like Cam's just hanging on the hook in the background and everything. Like that whole set piece is like brilliant. I love the set pieces of this movie. It's very realistic, it's creepy, and I just love hearing about behind the scenes about this movie. It's like holy shit. Speaking of realism, I love the gritty realism of this movie. Like, this movie is very fucking realistic because when it came to this movie, like, I'll get to more into the behind the scenes later when I talk about a certain part about this movie, but when it comes to gritty realism, this movie had so much going on behind the scenes. Like I said, with like the like actual human bones part of this movie, you got like scenes where Gunnar Hansen, like actually almost cut his foot, like doing a scene where when he was chasing Marilyn Burns' character Sally, where he's like running, and if you watch this movie in the new 4K, which I have, like you could see him turn and he kind of like stops himself from like actually falling down because in one scene that they did in an outtake about this movie, it's where like apparently in one of the takes from what I saw, it's very dark to see. You can't really see it, but Gunnar Hansen was running and he fell and he nearly cut himself with the actual chainsaw that he was using in that scene. It's like, whoa, like this movie is just very realistic. From beginning to end, it's just like so realistic. You're like that feels real. Like that whole scene where they drive by the slaughterhouse, that feels like that just feels like it's real. Like everything going on in this movie, it feels real. Like that whole scene where Sally gets kidnapped by the cook of this movie and like drives her home, and then they're getting dinner getting ready and getting Grandpa ready, and then apparently the scene where Marilyn Burns' character Sally gets her finger cut. She actually got her finger cut. Now there's a piece of tape on the actual knife that they used, but every time they would try and cut it, the actual blood thing that was on the tape wouldn't go off, so Gunnar Hansen basically just said fuck it, took off the tape and actually cut Marilyn Burns' finger. That's actual blood that you see coming out of her finger, and possibly real blood going into the guy who plays the grandfather of this movie. Ew. When it comes to horror movies, this probably has some of the best performances ever. Besides from like, I don't know, like Jaws or something like that, which has some of the best performances in movie history, and Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, obviously. But this movie has some of the best performances in horror movie history. This movie has great performances, not just by the main characters, especially the guy who plays Franklin. Now, I forget his name's like Paul or something like that, I believe. And he was written to be a very annoying character. And this goes with the gritty realism of this movie. Like, that feels like a real annoying person. Like, these family members don't feel like actors. They feel like real fucking creepy people trying to eat people. Like, those feel like actual cannibal eating family people. Like, and the Franklin character feels like a real annoying person. Like, the whole scene where he's like going up into the house and just like, come on, Franklin, it'll be a fun trip, and then starts spitting everywhere. Like, a lot of people call his character very annoying. I get it. But I've always felt bad for the guy. Like, his performance in that whole scene is just like, it's like, he outdoes himself. And apparently, in the behind the scenes of this movie, he stayed in character the entire fucking film. Like, beh- out like behind the scenes when they weren't filming, he would stay in character so everybody stayed away from him because he was so freaking annoying. And the actor who said he felt that if he turned off Franklin, he felt that he wouldn't be able to bring him back, so he just stayed in character the entire time. Then you got like the family members, of course. You get the guy who plays the hitchhiker. Like, whoa, he is fucking terrifying. And then you get the cook. Like, growing up before I saw the sequels, I always thought the guy was the dad of the family. I don't know if that is that just me because they don't in this movie they don't call each other brothers because in this entire movie he's like I told you not to go to that graveyard and everything and then he's just like I told you not to leave your brother alone by himself. It's like he sounds like he's their dad. Like growing up when I first watched this movie I was like is that their dad or something? And then when I watched part 2 it's like, oh, those guys are brothers. It's like, do they feel like brothers really? Like he treats them like the cook. He treats them like they're kids, and he feels like the only adult of this movie. Like it's creepy. Like his whole scene where he's just like beating down the hitchhiker when he sees him when he's bringing Alice back to the house. Like, look, half witch, little coon shit, and then starts beating the shit out of him with a stick. What I love about this movie is how it has dark comedy in it too. Where apparently if you have not seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, that's basic it's a dark comedy. That's a whole dark comedy. And when you watch that movie and behind the scenes, Toby Hooper said that he intended this movie to be a dark comedy. I don't really see it much, but little scenes like, look what your brother did to the door and just beating the shit out of the hitchhiker. Like scenes like that, that's pretty funny. I'm getting off topic here. But yeah, performance wise, this movie has great performances, especially by Gunnar Hansen, who played Leatherface, the best version of Leatherface. I don't care what the fuck anybody else says, jackasses. I love Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface. This is my Leatherface. Every time I think of Leatherface, I think of Gunnar Hansen in the role of the character. I always think of that look. I always think of that like that physicality of that character. Every time I think of Gunnar Hansen, he does a great performance where he just like makes it feel like childish and everything. And what I love about Leatherface is that he's not like Jason, Michael, or Freddy, or Chucky, where they love killing people. But no, Leatherface is not that. And he's more sympathetic. In a way, he's the family guard dog because in this movie and throughout the rest of the franchise, you find out he's not a bad person. His family makes him commit these gruesome acts of violence. Like he doesn't want to do this. Like because they treat people like cattle ever since the grandpa lost his job at the slaughterhouse. So they treat people like they're meat, basically. And Leatherface doesn't know any better. He's just the family guard dog. He only kidnaps and kills people if they're on their land or if they're trespassing. Like the first two people that died in this, you got Kirk and Pam. Kirk busted into his home looking for help. Leatherface doesn't know any better, so he killed him because he felt that he was a trespasser. Pam, again, walked into his home and he doesn't know any better. So he hooked her, but so he put her on a hook and then put her in a freezer. Again with Jerry, he just went into their home looking for Kirk and Pam. But again, Leatherface doesn't know any better, so he killed him because he felt that he was a trespasser. Yeah, sure, Leatherface commits gruesome acts of violence, but he doesn't know any better. He's a childish character. According to Toby Hooper and Gunnar Hansen too about the Leatherface character, is that he wears the different masks because he doesn't have his own personality. Especially because this movie is loosely based on Ed Gein, where this movie says that's based on true events. Bullshit! Oh, excuse me, I sneezed there. And where this movie takes very low influences on Ed Gein and everything, where he would take actual bone carcasses and he would actually take like human bones and make like furniture and lamps and shit out of it. Basically everything you see in this movie. And he also wore people's faces because he didn't have his own personality. Like Leatherface in this movie, he has his regular mask, which is just there really and doesn't have a purpose. It's just his regular mask that he wears day to day. Where in a way, a lot of people call it his killing mask, which I would understand. And then you got the old lady mask where he would use to dress up, that he would put on when he's making dinner in a way. It's like the grandmother outfit. And then you got the gaudy woman dress and mask, like that's like his mask that he would wear to dinner, where in a way, Leatherface is kind of like a transvestite. I'm not bashing on that community, I'm just saying, in a way he is, because the way that he wears the mask and he also kind of acts like a girl in a way too. We are not going to acknowledge the next generation. We are not going to acknowledge that. Mm, sorry. But I love the character of Leatherface because he's so sympathetic and simple and he doesn't have his own personality. He doesn't know any better. That's why I love Leatherface. He's not like every other slasher that just hacks and kills people because they want to. He kills people because he's forced to. He doesn't want to, he has to. If he wants to eat and survive because they don't have any money, they don't have the slaughterhouse anymore, they have to kill people so they can survive. It's God, there's something in my eye. It's fucked up to say, I know it, but you gotta have sympathetic for Leatherface. When it comes to characters, I do feel that the characters, they don't have much to do. They're kind of just there to die. But to me, a lot of people really don't like, one of their issues with this movie is with the characters. I've never had an issue with the main characters of this movie. You got Sally, Frank, Jerry, Pam, and Kirk. That's all we know about them. Pam and Kirk are a couple. Sally and Jerry are probably a couple, but we don't really know. They have like one short scene in the house where Jerry kind of flirts with her, like what happened to her grandmother and everything. They're kind of like flirting around, talking. Like other than that, they don't really seem like a couple. But at the same time, you never know. And then you got Franklin, who is the brother of Sally. Him and Sally have the most to do and have the most arc in the end and have the most character development where we learn more about them. Where he, like Franklin, he's in a wheelchair. And I've always felt bad for Franklin. Everybody calls him annoying. Yeah, sure, he is annoying. But I've always felt bad for the character. He didn't want to go on this trip. Sally forced him to go on the trip. And he's also in a wheelchair. He can't do much. He's very curious about everything. He can't do much. Yeah, sure, he's annoying, especially that one scene where he's spitting up, where he's just spitting and saying that it's going to be a fun trip and that he can't take any more fun. Yeah, sure, that scene's annoying, but I've always felt sympathetic for the character and I've always felt bad for him. Yeah, sure, he's annoying, but I've always felt bad for this character. But other than that, none of these characters are very interesting or likable, really. But I don't care. I feel that we get to know these characters well enough from what we see of them. Yeah, sure, we barely get to see them, but this movie's only 83 minutes. So what else do you want? And plus, this movie was very low budget, so yeah, and then of course you got the Sawyer family with the cook, the hitchhiker, and Leatherface. I already talked about Leatherface. I really like the hitchhiker of this movie. Besides from Leatherface, he's probably my favorite family member. I love John Cedal as the cook, but I've always loved the hitchhiker. What I love about the hitchhiker and his performance of the character is that apparently the guy who played the hitchhiker, he based his performance off of his cousin or nephew, I believe, who had like who was like who was special, I'll just say. I don't want to get into details, but he did note that he uh based his performance off of him, but he did come out and say that he never committed gruesome violence to anybody and he was only special, but he never ever committed any gruesome violence, which is a good thing. And I already talked about Leatherface, but I like the cook of this movie. He's probably the funniest out of all of them. I love about this movie that most slasher movies where they show you what's happening to the characters, such as the Friday the 13th movies or something like that. They show you how explicit they are and how violent they are. But what I love about this movie is that it doesn't show you what happens to the characters. It makes you use your own imagination. Such as like with Kirk, yeah, sure, we see what happens to him. He gets bashed over the head with a sledgehammer. That's really the only death that we really see. And Pam getting hooked on the hook, we don't really actually see it. Yeah, sure, we kind of see her slide down on it, but we don't actually see the impact. We just kind of see her go on like a metal thing. We don't even know it's a hook at first until we see a wide shot of it. And what I love about that, it makes you make your own imagination of what it looks like and being stabbed in the back with a hook. And that's what I like about it. It makes you use your own imagination, especially with Jerry's death too. Yeah, sure. We get a scene where they're like, oh yeah, this happened to him. He just gets hit over a sledgehammer. But the movie also makes you feel like, what does the aftermath look of him? Is there blood everywhere? Was he still alive after that? The movie makes you imagine what happens to the character, especially with Franklin's death. I mean, yeah, you kind of see it. There's a few blood here and there. We understand what's happening to him. He's getting cut up. But again, the movie makes you use your imagination of what's really happening to him and what it really looks like. We do get to see his skeleton in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, but it doesn't really look like much happened to him. But I don't really like to include that scene. I like to imagine that he got cut up and guts were everywhere. Well, at the same time, that's probably what happened. Now, you can never ever review this movie without talking about the most famous scene throughout this entire film, and that is the entire dinner scene, the third act dinner scene. Wow. That whole sequence where Sally is knocked out because she's getting the blood sucked out of her from the grandpa and everything, and then she passes out. All of a sudden, she wakes up, she looks down, she sees food, and then looks around. There's a bunch of skeletons, and then Leatherface is wearing a different mask with like a lady face, and then starts screaming, and then the family members start mocking her by howling and making all these weird noises. It's like, dude, they're mocking this motherfucker. Like, holy shit, that's dark. That's like really dark. And then just shit's going on, and then you find out that the cook is just the cook. He doesn't kill people. He doesn't like killing people. And which is a shame too, because a lot of remakes and sequels really got that character wrong. Especially in that Leatherface prequel, which I'll get to one day. But I love that whole dinner scene, and I'm glad that they didn't try to redo that in the remake that came out a few years later, because I don't know how you would ever redo that whole dinner scene. It's iconic from beginning to end, and I love seeing the behind the scenes about this movie and just like the hellish making of it. And if you have not seen the behind the scenes, it goes like this. Apparently, the camera it was like a 25 something else. And that's not very good because a camera with only 25 something makes it very, very dark to where you would not be able to see anything. You would basically only be able to see this. This is all you would be able to see throughout the entire film, during that whole entire scene. So what they had to do, they had to get giant, big fucking lights to shine down on the actors and the table and everything, that entire room. But the issue was, it made that entire room so fucking hot. And let's add in the fact that this was also filmed in Texas too, and we all know how hot it gets in Texas. Like, ugh, with the heat of Texas and the heat of the lights combined, that was hellish making. Apparently, the food was real. It was starting to rot. It was starting to cook the cold food and the rotten food, and made the whole room smell bad. It made the warm. It made the clothes that they were wearing warm, and those were clothes that they could not wash. And so they had to film for over like 30 to 35 hours straight, because the guy who played the cook, John Sheedow, apparently he was about to leave for some kind of like Broadway show or something. And the guy who played the grandpa, once he got the makeup on, he refused to put it back on after that. So they decided to film that whole scene within 30 plus hours. It is so fucking nuts about that. And apparently Gunnar Hansen, who plays Leatherface in this movie, he actually had to leave and throw up outside because he left that house, went outside, took off the mask, and just threw up because of the smell, how hot it was getting in there. Like, I'm surprised no one got a heat stroke and died during that whole filming scene watching it. It's like, was this film ever like fun to make? Like, holy shit! Like, listening to all this behind the scenes shit, like going on, like, oh, like this happened, like, oh, the hellish making of this movie, like that movie sounds like it was fucking horrible to make. Like, holy shit! I love that dinner scene. It's iconic from beginning to end. I love watching the behind the scenes of like how they talk about it, like how hellish it was to make, like how horrible it was to make. That whole dinner scene, I praise it from today. Like anyone asks me what's the greatest horror movie scene you seen in a movie? The dinner scene from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now for my final positive. And that is the closing moments of this scene, of this movie, not scene, but the closing moments of this movie is where the hitchhiker and Leatherface are chasing down Sally. The hitchhiker gets hit by a semi, and then the semi driver gets out, and instead of driving away, he grabs a wrench, runs away, hits Leatherface in the face. It's a weird rhyme to say. And then just runs away. And then we never see him again. And then Leatherface cuts his leg. And another behind the scenes fact about that, apparently, what they did, they had to have like some kind of tin around Gunnar Hansen's leg, and they had fake blood and meat to cover that so it wouldn't go through his leg. But apparently, the tin thing that was around his leg, got so fucking hot, so fucking fast that Gunnar Hansen felt like he cut his actual leg. But thankfully, he didn't. Doesn't this movie sound like such a great time to make? No, me neither. And then another truck comes by. Sally gets in it, and that whole scene. And another part about that movie, like the entire scene, Sally's laughing all the way home, like she's laughing, like she's crazy. Apparently, they've finished shooting, and Sally Hart and the person Marilyn Burns, who played Sally in this movie, thought that she was all done. But then, as Hollywood does, called her up. She's like, "Oh yeah, you got to come back." And then she filmed that whole hellish scene, and then the entire time she's laughing, she's like, "Holy shit, we finished the scene. We're finally done." And then you get that awesome chainsaw dance by Leatherface of in some sign of defeat and some sign of like pissed off that a victim actually got away this time, where he's just dancing, throwing the chainsaw all around, spinning around, and just going, wow. And then the movie just ends. Like he just like the entire time he's just doing that. It does it like for a good 2 minutes at least, and then like when he's about to lift up the chainsaw again, it just fades to black, and then the credits start rolling. You want to talk about one of the greatest movie endings ever, but at the same time it leaves you so pissed off too that you felt like there should have been more to the movie. Yeah, this is one of those movies where it leaves me satisfied, but at the same time it's just like I want to watch that movie again. Rewind the fucking movie. Well, guys, no issues with this movie. No negatives, no nothing. Went on a good rant there. I love this fucking movie. It's my favorite horror movie of all time. I've praised this movie for years. I will never understand if you're a horror fan and don't like this movie. I will not understand the life of me who you are and why you don't love this movie. I love the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's my favorite horror movie of all time. And if you do not own this movie, what the fuck are you doing? Go out and buy it. You guys think about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Have you seen it? What do you think about it? Do you love this movie, or are you like the 0.5% of the world that doesn't like this movie? Let me know in the comments below, and we will talk about it. And if you like this video, like it. If you love to subscribe, hit the bell notification so you will get notified for my latest videos. But of course, until my next video, see you next time. One more thing before I go, I want to say this now, and so you don't ask me like, "Hey, where's this? Where's that?" I will not be doing any more of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Not yet, anyways. Not yet. I want to wait until like another movie comes out at least. But if if some of you guys are interested and want to see that happen, let me know in the comments below, and I will proudly do that. It just depends how many people will be interested. If you guys are interested in seeing my thoughts on the other sequels, let me know in the comments below, and I'll look at them. And if there's enough people that want to watch them, I'll do them. But if there's not enough people, I probably won't be doing them anytime soon. But with that finally being said, see you guys.